All right, welcome to AP Quarantinglish. So today in class, you missed a discussion of the AP Poetry rubric. And it's similar to what you may have seen in AP Language, right? Is that 6-point rubric again. But we talked about it, talked about what's important with it, and then used it to analyze an essay. So what I'd like you to do is continue watching. I'm going to kind of break down the rubric for you. And after that, take one of those essays that is on Classroom and try and analyze it for yourself. Decide what you think what it deserves. And then later on, I will give you the answers, what the professionals said, how they rated it, with explanation. So I hope that all works well for you, and I hope you're all doing safe. Yeah, so here we go. So this is the scoring rubric for question 1 of, which is the poetry analysis on the AP test. I just want to talk a little bit about what the rubric says and how we apply it. If you had AP Lang last year, it might look familiar, right? There's a row for the thesis, 1 point for the thesis, up to 4 points for evidence and commentary, and then 1 point for sophistication. Now, when someone actually evaluates your essay in the spring, they don't fill out like a chart that says thesis 1 point, evidence 3 points, sophistication 0 points. They don't actually do that. All they do is give you a score between 0 and 6. Consequently, even though it is a supposedly objective rubric, the scorer may score it more holistically than that. But this is the guidelines that people are supposed to use when they are evaluating essays. So let's, this is the tool we're going to use, and let's take a look at each row. So the first one is the thesis, and I actually find it better to look at what a thesis isn't, how you don't get the point instead of how you do get the point, because to get it, right, you have a thesis. But how you don't get the point, right? The first way is if there's no defensible thesis, meaning there's no thesis there at all, right? Obviously. Secondly, the intended thesis only restates the prompt, right? So if you just restate the prompt, you're not going to get the point. You actually have to say something for yourself. Thirdly, if it's just a summary of it, right? So if the question asks about the complex relationship between two characters, if you just say there's a complex relationship between two characters, you haven't made a claim. What is it about it? What's going on? And then finally, you have a thesis, but it doesn't respond to the prompt, obviously, right? That makes sense, right? There is a defensible thesis, but it's off topic. Okay, so that's how you get the point, is just by answering right that what question. What is the complex issue here? And go from there. Okay, the second part is the evidence and the commentary, right? And there's a lot of stuff going on, and you can see that you kind of have rows here. First off, you get 0 points basically for repeating what's there, right? And offering no real information. But we move on to the 1 point, and you get a point if you have mostly general evidence. Okay, so what does that mean? If you're not specific about what's going on in the poem, but just talking about what the poem kind of does in general, fair enough. And then for the commentary, you're just telling what the evidence is. This happens and then this happens and this happens. It's almost like it's like saying what the poem says without going any further. So that's only 1 point. Okay, so for 2 points, we start off with there's some specific evidence, but more importantly, in the commentary, there's no line of reasoning. And so, maybe you explain how some evidence relates to the argument, but without a line of reasoning, it doesn't really work together. And we'll talk about the line of reasoning in a minute. Okay, we look at both 3 and 4 here for a second, and you notice that it says the same thing for evidence, provides specific evidence to support all claims in a line of reasoning. And it says that for both of them. So for 3 and a 4, either of those, you're providing specific evidence. Where does it become different? Because you look at the commentary, it explains how some of the evidence supports a line of reasoning and consistently explains how the evidence supports a line of reasoning. Okay, so that's just like the quality of your commentary. You know, sometimes you might have some evidence that you don't explain, I suppose, and whereas with a 4 you do. Where I see the big difference, though, comes at the bottom, where it says explains how at least one literary element or technique in a poem contributes to the meaning. So we talk about literary elements. These are things like, metaphor, or imagery, or it could be the use of diction or tone, or any of those kinds of things. But we compare that to the 4, and we have multiple elements, and so you're spending time looking at different things throughout the poem. So the question becomes, you're using these literary elements, and how do you organize those? Well, that, it turns out, is your line of reasoning. When the rubric talks about a line of reasoning, what they mean is the logical structure to your essay. How are you going about analyzing the poem? Does that make sense? That's your line of reasoning. You have a line of reasoning, and maybe you divide up the poem into 3 parts because that's kind of how the poem makes sense. That's a line of reasoning. You start with analyzing the beginning, you then go to analyzing the middle, and then end with analyzing the end and kind of the whole point and bring it all together. That's a line of reasoning. It's the roadmap to your analysis. Okay, finally, the magical sophistication row. And I think a lot of this is, it's just how good of an essay did you write? Because you might look at how good is your analysis. Maybe you have a really good analysis, or maybe you're just a really good writer. And those are 2 of the ways that you can get the point. It's harder to game plan for that. You can't say, oh, well, this essay I'm going to write really well. That's not really the kind of thing you can do. The only one I think that's worth noting then is number 2, where it says illuminating the student's interpretation by situating it within a broader context. And so that means, are you connecting the analysis to, the real world? Is your analysis relate to both the text in its larger context? Does it become a commentary on universal issues? And if so, you might get that extra point. But it's pretty hard to game plan for anything outside of that. All right, so I hope that all makes sense. So again, take a look at one of the essays attached in Google Classroom and evaluate it. When you're done, you can compare what you said about the essay to what the professionals said. I hope you're all feeling well. Take care.